Well, this was a game that felt quite important for both managers in terms of the league table will still take its turns and have its ups and downs as the season goes on. But for both of these managers, this felt like a massive opportunity for them to, I don't know, just lay down a marker, and both I felt like needed a really big performance against the other. Because even though Chelsea have won 6-2 this season against Wolves, that was such a mad game of football where, as much as Wolves lost by 4 goals, they could have easily had something from the game. It was such a back and forth open affair. Chelsea just took their chances. And there have been points I've been impressed with the Enzo Maresca tactics and display, points where I haven't been as impressed with it, and I felt like they looked a little bit vulnerable. But I thought they produced a really good performance today, starting to really find a balance to this team that is working completely. And there's still issues, of course. They're not going to go from where they've been to a complete 180, but there's elements of this team that I'm starting to like, and they're starting to become a raise in performances. I realise what I've just done with Cole Palmer there. Hang on. Okay, there we go. That's fit. Be encouraging going forward. It's still going to be hard for them to finish top four with the quality at the top of the table, but you just take each game as it comes, and they've got many options. That's one thing we need to remember from Chelsea. West Ham, however, I think they're in trouble. I think they're in really trouble. I was quite negative about this team and the appointment of Julian Lopetegui at the start of the season. And this is the third time I've watched this team now this season. And each time I've been very underwhelmed, but I thought they were particularly terrible today from an individual performance perspective, from a managerial perspective, tactically, just everything about this performance was, I thought, brutally bad. Attacking, defensive, and we're going to go in depth in that now. We'll go over the attacking side first, as we'll want to do. So West Ham would build up, as you can see here, in a 3-4-3, very flat, very little movement, very little rotation, just very basic in the tactical approach on the ball. And I thought it was so poor to watch. So poor to watch. Alvarez playing as a central centre-back that would alternate with Mavropanos. I've had an absolute mare here with putting this team together. Mavropanos is not number 19. Here we go. Sorted. There we go. Apologies. Some admin on screen. Who knows? Do you like a little bit of a peek behind the curtain? Well, there you go. You got some. Where Alvarez and Mavropanos would alternate, as I was just saying. So sometimes you'd find Alvarez in the right centre-back position. Sometimes you'd find him centrally. More often than not, it was central. Wan-Bissaka and Emerson playing as the attacking wing-backs. Paquetá playing a little bit more advanced with Guido Rodriguez dropping in. Bowen as the striker. Somerville and Kudus started wide, started drifting inwards. And I will say, Aaron Wan-Bissaka has been horrifically miscast in this right wing back role. I thought he was going to be signed as a sort of right back / right centre back that could tuck in and be used mainly for his defensive duties, whether that be in transition or in open play. And he's got enough technical ability to play this role, and he would add a little bit more mobility into that back line. As an attacking right wing back, he is not up to the standard of where West Ham want to be. He's a good player, Wan-Bissaka. I'm a United fan, and I loved him, and I wasn't gutted we sold him, but I really wished him the best, and I hope he has a good Premier League career. The profile they had for what they wanted from a right back is not what Aaron Wan-Bissaka is good at, and it just screams of they signed the player because there was a bit of a bargain aspect to it. He was in the last year of his contract, and they got him fairly cheap, a lot cheaper than what United got for him. So it feels like that's what they've signed him on, not actually in terms of a system use and a profile and a philosophy they're trying to build. And Chelsea would defend 4-4-2. You'd have Jackson and Palmer alternating between the back three. Let's say if Alvarez was on the ball here, they'd switch over to this place if they tried to play through on the right-hand side with Mavropanos. If that wasn't the case, they'd quickly switch across to the left-hand side where Palmer and Jackson would follow suit. Then in the midfield is when it became a little bit more man-marking orientated with Madueke and Sancho tracking the fullbacks, Caicedo dropping in and Paquetá and Enzo Fernandez pushing on to Guido Rodriguez, who would drop in a little bit deeper than Paquetá would. And I have to say, this was performance befitting of the Brighton Caicedo. I thought he was excellent. Offensively, we'll talk about soon. But anytime the ball came into Paquetá, he didn't have time to settle and turn and get his pass away. Caicedo was on him like a rash, intercepting passes, jumping from markers if Jared Bowen dropped in, to try and provide an overload in that position. He used his decision making well. He anticipated things amazingly, and just a fantastic performance. Full credit to Caicedo because he's struggled since he's joined. I think that's fair to say. And Somerville and Kudus marked by the fullbacks, and where they would typically look to come inside, Cucurella and Fofana would narrow up. But as I said, when the wing backs would move forward for West Ham, they would be well tracked. So Wan-Bissaka getting forward, Jadon Sancho would follow suit, Madueke tracking Emerson back down here. And so, as I said, it would turn into a six at the back, a sort of 6-2-2 at points for Chelsea. And they defended this area of the pitch really well. They weren't overcommitted with the pressing. They allowed West Ham to come onto them because, to be fair, if you did press them and you did leave space in behind, West Ham do have some quick players and a direct option so they can hit over the top of that back line. And that back line for Chelsea isn't the most mobile. So fair play to Enzo Maresca. He adapted and used a game plan brilliantly. And the way that, to be fair, West Ham did try and use wide overloads to their advantage was if they could quickly shift the ball across to the wider centre back and outdo the press of Palmer and Jackson, then he would charge forward with the ball, Kilman on this side, and he would typically try to play with Somerville and Emerson and provide just, that, as I say, those overloads on this side and beat the press. But to be fair, Fofana would do a good job, or Madueke, of jumping out into this position here to close on the ball. Maybe Caicedo could follow suit. Fofana, as I say, would come out and Adebayo would cover around. So they push the numbers over there and they'd switch their entire play over to that side. Colwell narrowing up, Cucurella coming inside, Sancho as well, Fernandes dropping in. So they did get a few openings down the side, West Ham doing that, but Chelsea dealt with them fairly well and prevented them from becoming a real big issue. The only time West Ham they had a bit of joy was when they pushed into their main attacking phase, which was a 3-1-6 of Kilman just drops in a little bit here. I'll just drop Palmer, Fernandes, and Caicedo. And Caicedo and Fernandes would stick close to the edge of their defence just to prevent any real space from opening up in between and trying to get to as many players as possible. Jackson and Palmer a lot deeper. And Mavropanos and Kilman would come wide to get on the ball and create from these areas. As I say, you'd sometimes get Bowen dropping in to help contribute to central overloads. Paquetá was given a bit more of a free role to get on the ball and find pockets of space when they opened up. But again, Chelsea defended really well as a unit. And the only player that was a bit of a threat for West Ham was if they could get the ball wide to Kudus in this area here, if Wan-Bissaka was playing a little bit more reserve and give Kudus more space on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, wherever he was at that particular time, then he used his dribbling ability and his technical quality to unlock moments and put some crosses in, force a couple saves out of Sanchez. But he was really the only threat for West Ham. If they couldn't get the ball to him, the attack broke down fairly easily. It would be fairly basic. And nothing was created, and Chelsea kept them out and kept their clean sheet, which was well deserved. But how did they do in attack? Chelsea would build up in a number of ways. It would either be in the 2-4-4, as you saw here, or as we saw more commonly, especially at the start of the game, the sort of 2-3 or 3-2-5, as you can see, with Enzo Fernandez pushing up into the more attacking half space and Cucurella coming inside. And West Ham had a weird system where they would try and leave the fullback areas exposed and prevent the easier build-up options, which you can kind of understand. But when you play with a back five, I don't know what's wrong with maybe having your left back pushed up into this area here, closing the player down. And I think this comes down to an issue with this West Ham back five. And I assume it's the reason why Edson Alvarez was moved into the middle of them to cover for this. They are not mobile. They are slow, sluggish, and when they have to defend more than a little bit of space, they struggle. They do not have the legs to do so. And as much as West Ham tried to press Chelsea high, they couldn't risk that defence being exposed. And so at points, you'd have the back five staying flat and these front four defending and pressing up high. And it just created this massive disconnect in the middle of the field. So Somerville and Kudus would come over to the centre backs, as I say, Paquetá and Bowen dropping in on the inverted players. And so this did leave a pass into Fofana where then if he got a touch and got it out of his feet, then Emerson would react to press up high, allowing Kilman to maybe come across. But again, it was slow, sluggish, and it gave Chelsea time to really get their attack going. And because of the space they had in the midfield, they could really disrupt West Ham's shape as much as they wanted. So Cucurella and Caicedo would narrow up and create spaces like this. Cole Palmer would drop off into this area. Enzo Fernandez would drop into this area to try and outnumber the West Ham press. And so it would create situations where if they would try and shut off this pass here, if Kudus dropped in to try and get onto Fernandez, then Colwell would get free. And then again, one of Kudus or Bowen would reactively try and press, so a man became free, and if Chelsea could just keep their composure, they could play out fairly easily. Rodriguez would follow Cole Palmer into this area here, so again, this just created more of a gap in between the midfield and defence for West Ham, and it just opened up space that Chelsea could attack through. And again, that back five remained flat. Jackson dropped into space well. He managed space in front of the defence, he managed space in behind the defence well, got on the ball, linked up with his teammates. Alvarez couldn't deal with the way he would drop off and go in behind. He struggled with them all game. And if Fernandez and Cole Palmer could stay disciplined up here, then this left Rodriguez in acres of space. And he got subbed off about 35 minutes in, Rodriguez. and I feel sympathy towards him. Again, like the defence, he lacks so much mobility, and as much as I don't think it was a bad signing because it was a free transfer, and he has technical qualities that I think can work within a system. He's a very Spanish league midfielder. Leaving him in the amount of space he had to cover was suicide, and I didn't get Lopetegui's attitude towards him when he subbed him off. As much as Rodriguez had a shocker, you are exposing his limitations in the worst way possible. I'm not sympathetic towards you, and you do not have the right, in my personal opinion, to I think be as unfair to Rodriguez as that. Sub him off, fair enough, but the ignoring of him, I thought it was a little bit. I didn't like it. I have to say that. So if Chelsea could break free of that West Ham press, then they would find either Cole Palmer or Enzo Fernandez open. And occasionally you'd get Mavropanos sort of reactively engaging from the defensive line to get on Fernandez, but it was slow. It felt too individual. It didn't feel cohesive. So this would open up space that Jackson could exploit where he got his second goal from. He could come over maybe to the left-hand side if Fernandez could rotate, and it would cause Alvarez and Mavropanos to get a bit lost in their positions where they could play off of each other really well. Jackson could then come off into this position where he played a nice little 1-2 with Sancho for the first goal and attack that space in behind. Alvarez, Mavropanos, they just couldn't cover well enough. Because the wingers of Chelsea, Madueke and Sancho, really did a good job of forcing the wing backs for West Ham back. And so it meant that central play could really just outwork that West Ham back line. And again, when I speak about defending individually, Kilman was lost at points in his position. Does he cover round? Is he still conscious of the space between Emerson and himself and Mavropanos? Does he cover for the fact that his fellow centre-backs have engaged? He didn't know what to do. Palmer would make runs off of Rodriguez, who couldn't keep up. He didn't have the mobility to keep up. And at points, it just got broken. And that was exposed really badly, I thought, for the second goal, because when Chelsea would move a bit further up the pitch, Somerville and Kudus dropping into more orthodox winger positions, with Cucurella coming inside. Paquetá and Bowen initially dropped in on Cucurella because the wingers had dropped into their natural position. This left Bowen in a position where he felt like he needed to come and engage the centre backs on the ball, and in doing so, he left one of the men three in between the lines. Paquetá isn't maybe as defensively comfortable covering that space, which would be hard for anyone who is of a defensive mind to do. And Caicedo was able to get on the ball with a bit of space. I think at this point as well, Mavropanos got pulled onto Fernandez, who dropped a bit deeper, and this left Jackson with a lot of space to run off of Alvarez, who tried to come in close. And again, this is what I talk about: players defending individually. He's reacted by Mavropanos breaking the lines to engage with Fernandez. He isn't sure whether he should cover or engage as well. There feels a real lack of instruction and a lack of understanding of what to do in these situations. So he reactively comes short to Jackson. Jackson, with his pace advantage, spins in behind. Lovely little pass from, I believe it was Caicedo, and Chelsea get that second goal, and that was really the killer blow. And as I say, just so individual in their defending, West Ham, it was a mess. It was a real mess. The space they'd give away from the front, the midfield space that they'd allow Chelsea to play in, and the back five just working not together and not in tandem and giving away space. And as I say, with that change made where Rodriguez went off, Souček moved into the midfield. So if I just sort that out. And to be fair, West Ham, they did press a lot more aggressively. If I just push this on now. So West Ham, as you can see, would push a lot more aggressively. Jarrod Bowen would jump to try and press Sanchez. Mavropanos would engage Fernandez more, not just reactively. He would actually go to engage. Wan-Bissaka would come up to Cucurella. Alvarez was more focused on Jackson. Kilman could move across to Madueke. Emerson pushing onto Fofana. The only issue that this created was it left Sancho in a lot more space on this left-hand side. But West Ham's press was improved, and as a result, this pass didn't come in that often. But when it did, to be fair, Alvarez covered across. Mavropanos moved in. Wan-Bissaka covered in well, and they reacted well to that quick change of play, but it was too little too late by that point. It was 2-0 to Chelsea. They were cruising in the game, and then they got their goal early in the second half, and by that point it became a bit of a training match, and it became hard to watch from that point onwards because it was just so comfortable. But yeah, worrying signs for West Ham. If I was a West Ham fan, I'd be worried. I would be shocked if Lopetegui's in the job come the end of the season. Not that I want a manager sacked. it just doesn't look like it's working. And as I said, with the recruitment and the squad they've assembled, it's become a bit of a mess. It feels like they've just played the market as opposed to play for the team. And I just don't think that that's a way of building a squad in 2024. But who knows? Long season ahead. Anything could happen. Anything could change. But full credit to Chelsea. Enzo Maresca adapted and he pulled off his game plan really well. And there was some quality improvements in performances. Cucurella, Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez, Nick Jackson, Jadon Sancho all had very good games, and full credit. A comfortable performance for Adebayo as well in his first Prem start. Admittedly, he wasn't threatened all too much, and Colwell's growing game by game into this team. And fair play. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you disliked it. Comment down below and tell me why either way. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you next time. In a bit, lads.